Okay, so I just wanted to run through just a quick edit session of those photos from the last video from the Rocky Mountain National Park. So these were shot in my Holga and developed in Kodak HT110 Dilution B. We'll just switch over to the Lightroom session here, and I've got my two folders here. I've got this original scans, and then I will immediately export those as TIFFs and re-import them into a folder called edits. That way I always have the raw scans available to me. So let's go ahead and get started here. So move some of these around, get them back in their appropriate order here. So if you remember from the video, we'll just go in order here of the first composition, and then every shot from there has a shot with no filtration and then a shot with either a yellow or a red filter. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. I keep my edits pretty simple, so I only do what I would be able to do in the darkroom. So I don't really mess around too much with like fancy slider controls. I more or less am looking at exposure, contrast, white point, black point, and then I'll do some like burning and dodging kind of stuff if I need, or gradients for like burning in the sky and that kind of stuff. So with this guy, most of this time I just spend kind of tweaking, listening to music, and just sort of chilling out. Do some edits. I usually will mess around with like different stuff. I use this as an opportunity to like field test what I'm thinking idea-wise, or sometimes just to like find out what it is I'm looking for in terms of what the negative needs. Just do a couple little, get rid of some of this dirt in here. So yeah, so that you can mess around in Lightroom and kind of mock it up the way you would in the darkroom, and then ew, that's okay. Mock it up the way you would in the darkroom. That way you don't have to like burn through a bunch of paper trying out new things. So I use this as an opportunity to like experiment and play around, and I usually move fairly quick through these. So the two options we have here are, this is without filtration and then this is with a red filter. After looking at all these, you may have a different preference than me, but I like the lighter, softer look of the frames without the filtration, so I'm gonna go without it. And usually cropping too, I'm really open-minded about cropping. I know some people have really strong preferences for cropping and how much you do. I'm not one of those people. For the type of work I'm doing, landscapes and stuff, I'm not a documentary. I'm not documenting events or, a journalist or anything. So I feel like I can be a little more expressive in my interpretations here. You may feel differently, but that's just how I like doing it. So that, I feel like that crop feels kind of cool to me, but just mess around with different stuff and see what feels good. And I'll live with these too for a little while, so I'll arrive at pretty quickly at what I think. If I'm going into it with preconceptions about what I want it to look like or how I want it to look, it can definitely sway. I'll go for that immediately, but I'll live with it for a little while just to make sure that how I felt is how I'm still feeling. So you know, I try not to box myself in to any particular composition until I live with it and it feels right. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling because I'm having a hard time speaking and doing this at the same time, so please forgive me. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not thrilled about this. Some people are probably flipping out about the crops, but that's okay. To each their own. Yeah, I think that feels pretty good. These mountains here cascading into the back is really what I was looking at, and yeah, I think that feels pretty good. I'll usually check like white points and black points, and since I'm split grade printing, that's usually something I can control fairly well using the low contrast filter and the high contrast filter. I look at that as finding the white point and black point in Lightroom. I can kind of control not so much the white point, I guess. So contrast, I guess, would be filter 5 in the darkroom, but I don't really like using the contrast slider as a whole. I'll just use the black point. So just get rid of a few of these and see, like, even now that feels a little too smashed to me for my taste. I'm really digging like softer tones these days. Not cranking down too much on stuff. I got kind of carried away for a while with like really crushing stuff. And so I'm trying now to just have a bit of a softer touch in the overall feel. I think that feels pretty good. What do you think? Nice. Yeah, I'm digging that. I think I'll live with that for a little while. So this is the darker red filter. These are the two trees. This is the red filter, and you can see pretty intense. It cuts through a lot of that haze in the background, and the clouds obviously are popping, but if you notice around like these mountains and stuff, it really starts slicing through a lot of that. Yeah, but again, I'm really kind of digging these softer vibes. I've been looking into a lot of platinum palladium printing, as I've mentioned in a previous video, and not really planning on jumping into that anytime soon, but I was reading an article about platinum printing and about them being softer prints generally, and somebody commenting, or they commented in that, about how low contrast prints, soft prints are kind of like avocados. So it's an acquired taste for some. And it definitely was for me. I'm really starting to come around to the softer look. I feel like, for me anyhow, the individual image usually works well. In my experience, if I'm doing like singular images, sometimes a strong, stout, contrasty print that's dark and moody, it looks really, really cool. But what I'm finding is that as I build a larger body of work and that work is more cohesive together, there's a lot less clashing with when everything can just breathe a little bit and everything's not kind of like fighting for attention. So yeah, I'm thinking that's pretty good. This is a pretty simple one here. You see, there's a little bit of a line on this frame here. I did notice there was some scratches or something on the emulsion, and I don't know if it like scratched in the camera or just from my processing, but this one, you see we got some ghosting here. This looks like the inside like frame, 6x6 plastic frame the mask inside of the Holga. I could be wrong. This is with no filter, so this one is with a yellow filter, which this Aspen was bright yellow, so you can see we obviously got the yellow to lighten up quite a bit. And yeah, this one's gonna need a heavy crop in my opinion. And that's one thing I would have to say about the Holga as well, is that when I'm shooting with this, because it's a fixed lens with no other lens options, I'm generally thinking about cropping too. And like I said, I'm not shy about the crop. Digitally, on these lower res scans, you might see some of the effects of your digital artifacts from cranking too much on these photos, but in the darkroom, you've got a lot of wiggle room in terms of what still looks good when it's when you have a heavy enlargement. So a 120, the medium format frame 6x6 that comes out of the Holga enlarges really well, so I'm not really worried about cropping it like this. And this is one of those images. This is kind of a rip-off image. I've had these types of images in my head for years based on like the Ansel kind of Aspens. And it's really hard to get away from the Ansel Adams comparative when you're shooting black and white landscapes, which I'm not offended by it. I think it's great. But yeah, it does kind of make things a little more difficult when you are searching for, your own voice in your work. And I'm really into trees right now. I'm really, really loving the trees. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I want to try and see what it looks like if we just add a little kind of vignette. I don't want to get too drastic because this stuff starts looking really obvious if you do go too hard, and I might actually lower this contrast a little bit. Might lower the contrast and maybe see if we can. I don't want to crush the blacks too much because it starts looking really gimmicky. It starts looking like a like a color image converted to black and white with the clarity knob cranked up. Like, what would this look like? Yeah, baby. Oh yeah, gross. Yeah, let's not do that. I think this is feeling pretty good. It's a little gray, but we'll keep playing with it. We'll live with it for a little while. But this is one of the things that the Holga is just such an anomaly. This is midday light. Obviously, there's a ton of trees, and the sun is coming from this direction, as you can see. But I mean, look at these look at this sort of like micro contrast, local contrast here that's happening in a different areas here. And then you get some areas that are like, what happened? It gets like really mushy really quickly. So you get this sort of funky, really pristine high-end look, and then really not so much in some cases. So it's like it swings for the fences, that Holga, every time. And sometimes it nails it. And this is one that I was like, oh! I've been trying to shoot this tree for like the past year. This is the third time I've tried to shoot this. And this is actually the best output of it. I tried to shoot this with the 4x5, and this looks better to me. This scene though, and most of these trees that I've been finding are definitely going to become tree friends of mine, and I'm going to be going back and visiting these trees as they grow. and as they go through the seasons. And again, comparisons to other photographers that are hard to escape, but these are very like Michael Kenna-esque images to me, and I'm a huge fan, obviously. And then with the Holga involved, it's like it's hard to be original these days, especially with the internet. But I'm really loving the minimal approach to my work lately, and it's been allowing me to take a lot of stress off of my myself. You know, in terms of it's got to be perfect. You know, it's like grain. If you guys know um, the motto of grain is to celebrate imperfection. And, you know, that's every bit as important to me as a person as I grow and as I become a better photographer. The Holga is really helping me to remember that celebration of imperfection, even though it is freaking excruciating sometimes to embrace it. The Holga doesn't give me any choice. So it's enforcing that sort of poetic part that is easier said than done. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that yourselves. But anywho, without waxing poetic too much, this one I think I'm gonna have to play with a little bit and find what resonates with me. You know, here's what I'm thinking right now. I don't want this too contrasty as I pull the blacks down. I don't want it too contrasty, but I also don't want it too flat. Now I sound like somebody who doesn't know what they want. But I do know what I want. I just know that I'll know it when I see it. Huh. How are we feeling about this? So I use this double L to get into kind of a dim mode and then a full-on white background. By default, that is black background, but I change it to white because it helps me kind of visualize. I was going to show it to you, but I don't actually remember where it's at. Interface. Here we go. Lights out, screen color white, and dim is 80%. So you can change this to black, which is the default, and I change it to white. I do that so I can kind of visualize this in the matte. And this really helps me because I've got a black frame around my monitor as well. I'm using the iMac 27-inch, so there's a nice thick inch or so border of black all around it. And that gives me an opportunity to just sort of sit back and observe and look and see how it feels. And this to me is still feeling a bit dingy. Just take this contrast up ever so slightly. Let's try to pull this sky back down just a little. So I like what's going on here. We just need to bring that sky back in just a bit. And then I'm just going to grab that little... And then, I know there's a bunch of other stuff that I need to do, but I'll do that later. And then I usually grab the ruler and just drag across. And another note on this ruler, I really wish there was something like this on the wet darkroom. I've had agony at times trying to get a horizon level and like moving the easel and I think I have it right, but I don't have it right, and you make a print and sometimes I just get further and further away. You know what, let's try to add a, actually we'll keep that there, it's on 0 if we want it back. Let's try to just add a little vignette here and just see what that feels like. It's not bad. It's before and after that. Okay. That looks pretty good. Maybe we can just make these edges just slightly, ever so slightly. This one is a little bit dark, but maybe we like that. We'll see. Okay. Maybe it's a little off center here. And then I use the command and then brackets above the right next to the P key, and then right above enter I use those brackets to flip the image just as you would in the darkroom. And just flipping that image just a little bit kind of gives me a different perspective on it, and it makes it a little easier to put it where I like it. And I like it. I think that looks pretty good. Got some good detail in there. This is just a, this is just a scan on the Epson. So if it looks good with me giving it a moderate amount of care, with the a moderate amount of care with the scan, then I know that when I print it on the enlarger, that I'm going to get a nice, crisp, sharp image. Hopefully with as little or no dust or hair involved on the negative, because again, spotting prints in Lightroom is a lot easier and, dare I say, fun compared to spotting prints in the darkroom. I think the first print is fun and everything after that is just like a test of patience. So hopefully that was cool for you guys. If you have any questions, let me know. I know I rambled a bit there, so sorry about that. I'm trying to learn brevity here and not be too vague about things. So again, trying to find the nice middle ground there. So yeah, working on some other videos and really excited for what's to come. So if you guys have anything you would like to see, please let me know, comment here, and hit me up on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Chris Swartwood, and all the links are below. And I'm starting to get on Twitter too, because I'm finding that I just want a quick way to be able to communicate back and forth with you guys that doesn't involve like making a full video. So yeah, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.